the newest installment of the webinar series, Revenue Stream with RMS. I'm Tracy Henderson. I'm the founder of Reach Communications. Joining me are Revenue Management Solutions Director of Consulting Services, Matt Parker, and Director of Analytical Services, Francois Acerra. Thanks for joining us, guys.
Hi, Tracy. Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
Today we'll be talking about RMS's latest consumer report and how operators and franchisees can use the insights as they plan for 2022. Francois, you are always in the middle of these surveys, and you covered so much ground in this recent Q3 surveys, from working environments to breakfast to vaccination status, mandate requirements. What insights do you find were the most helpful to RMS clients?
So going back over the latest quarterly survey, we feel that I think the most interesting stats out of the whole survey is really micro, right? We know that restaurants have been facing a lot of macroeconomic challenges, from inflation to labor shortages, but in the end, we surveyed people about, what they are concerned about when it comes to delivery. And 60% of them said getting the order right. Like, I do not always get what I order, right? So I thought that was a very interesting piece of data, just because we know that off-premise is not necessarily going away. We know that restaurants can't really do anything about inflation of labor shortages, but they certainly can focus on, delivering the best off-premise experience that they can. And order accuracy is a big piece of that, according to consumers.
Yeah,
Sure.
And just to expand on that, Francois touched on a couple of the headwinds that restaurant brands and operators are facing currently, whether it be food costs or labor pressures, and which has resulted in brands needing to take more price now than ever. So just making sure that as we continue to take more price, that we are executing on those other pieces of the value equation that we can as effectively as possible. So hitting things like, order accuracy or the quality of the food or just the overall guest experience. Because even though these guest experiences are off premise, it's still important to make sure that we're representing the brand to offset the potential impact of those higher prices as much as possible.
So interesting. So Francois, you've talked about maybe the most impactful. What was the most surprising stat from the survey?
Overall, the most surprising stat to me was the fact that 61% of people still call up the restaurant to place their order. In an age where, there's been so much technological progress from all the restaurant brands over the past 18 months or so, I thought that was a surprising stat. But I think it echoes the order accuracy stat from earlier. People want to make sure that they get exactly the food that they want, and sometimes human interaction is the best way to ensure that.
Sure. Did you see that just us old people wanted to call, or was it across?
No, it was actually across all generations. Surprisingly, I had the same intuition as you just did. I was like, oh, that's probably a older generation thing. I don't want to use a mobile phone to place an order on an app, but no. Gen Xers, millennials like to call up restaurants just as much as Gen Xers and boomers.
Interesting. So Matt, we've talked about the data, but you're in the trenches. You work with clients ranging from full service to QSR. If you could distill the survey into one piece of advice, what would it be?
I think it's just that for brands to understand that what it might have been a lifeline for them in 2020 is now likely going to be a regular part of their business. We know that these off-premise revenue centers are more important now than ever. Delivery was ramping up in 2019 prior to COVID, but due to the pandemic, the adoption rate was really accelerated. So those that might have been slower adopters to third-party delivery, were taking part of that experience. So just making sure that we are consistent with our product that's off premise as we are on, making sure, again, I touched on it earlier, but we're protecting that brand image. And, again, just that it's here to stay. We know that as restaurants have needed to take more price, that average check has contributed to some of the sales growth. But what we're seeing is that even when we're comping 2019 numbers, that traffic levels are on par. So just making sure that we
Yeah, I've actually heard it said as, it's not either or anymore. So, 2018, 2019, we would either order takeout, and most of the time it wasn't from a nice restaurant, or we'd go into the restaurant. So it was like, do we do, Mexican takeout pizza, or do we go to a nice or casual restaurant to sit down? Sounds like it's almost both and now.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. Even for some of our restaurant brands that maybe, as you touched on, would you wouldn't think of as to-go brands, whether they're polished casual or fine dining, that even with them maxing out their dining rooms, they're still doing quite a bit of to-go business. So making sure that we are taking advantage of that to continue to build sales as we move forward.
Yeah, it's interesting. You mentioned that even traffic, even when compared to 2019 for fine dining or
Mhm.
sit down, you said it's even from September 2019.
Yeah, we're seeing that it's on par now with 2019 levels. Sales are up, driven by check, but we're seeing that traffic is at least on par for a lot of brands. Some are even up versus 2019 numbers.
Yeah, I believe it. I've been in the lobby of a nice restaurant picking up, and the restaurant's full, and there's 20 people in line to pick up. It's
Yeah.
amazing. Well, Matt, you're still kind of on the in the hot seat. So you mentioned sales increases are often due to price increases right now. What's how's price sensitivity weighing into customer decision making?
I think it's definitely going to be continue to be a part of something that the brands have to evaluate, and understanding how that sensitivity might differ between those different revenue centers, and how we might change our pricing strategies due to that. A part of your menu that is more sensitive in restaurant might be less sensitive for your to-go business. So strategically, how do we take advantage of that? But yes, customers are going to have to start making some of these decisions. We know that as food at home and food away from home continue to increase, the customers are going to continue to see inflation likely at a rate higher than what wages are increasing. So they're going to have to be making choices on that dining occasion, how they're going to spending those, dining dollars for their family. So, just understanding that there likely will be some shifts. Part of the report touches on how we're starting to see some declines in delivery, but to go is still, an important part of the business.
Sure. Francois, you're the stats man. Any stats that relate to what Matt's talking about?
I think Matt is making a great point, right? Price sensitivity is going to change as we're in an inflationary environment, which also means that consumers might tolerate price increases a little bit more, knowing that prices are going up across the economy. But Matt was making a great point between takeout and dine-in sensitivity might look a little bit different for certain brands, and leveraging opportunities in one or the other will definitely be important. If we look at the perception of pricing through our survey, we have over 56% of respondents that feel that they're paying higher prices for restaurants, and we have 68% that feel they're paying higher prices for groceries. Yet people are still going to the restaurants. We see that habits have been pretty sticky throughout the pandemic. Now is probably a better time to take price before we potentially go into a lower inflation environment next year. But again, we don't know if inflation is going to go away in the short term. And I think right now, understanding what are your opportunities in terms of dine-in versus on-premise versus off-premise is one key to making sure that consumers don't count you out of their decision set just based on price solely, right?
Sure. We've talked a lot about off-premise versus on-premise. I was surprised in the survey to see that delivery is waning. Although, dining at home through different ways, as we've talked about, takeout, drive-throughs booming, but deliveries waning. Do you foresee that? I guess, Francois, I'll ask you, do you foresee that trend continuing in 2022?
Possibly. I think off-premise as a whole has become, an animal of its own, right? As Matt was saying, what used to be a survival tactic 18 months ago is now, a full part of the business and should have its own staffing, pricing, and its own strategy. Delivery is a piece of off-premise. I think the waning down of delivery is more related to higher prices and delivery fees. I think people have grown accustomed to, paying the same as dine-in prices, but just picking up food. So takeout or drive-through has become a preferred option as we've gone on this pandemic, just because I think there was just a reticence in the market to pay higher prices and pay delivery fees constantly. I don't think delivery is going away anytime soon, but I think people have sort of grown into their habits, right? They may tolerate delivery and pay that extra fee every once in a while, but going forward, I think takeout is probably the true winner of this pandemic.
Matt, is there anything you want to add to Francois's comments about delivery and off-premise in general?
Just to keep stacking onto that idea that delivery is here to stay, or really off-premise in general, whether they be to-go or delivery. Restaurants can't really think of themselves as a restaurant that offers to-go or that offers delivery. It's really an important revenue center that they need to focus on just as much as they do their, in-restaurant experience. And those that do really will have a competitive edge over those other brands. Just really hammering home that idea of, as we take more price, making sure that we offset that with being as efficient as other pieces of the value equation as much as possible. So, again, just touching on order accuracy and the quality of the food, and making sure that those interactions with the employee that's taking the order, that all those pieces are executed as well as possible to make sure that we're offsetting that increased price.
Yeah, it's interesting, Francois. We just keep talking about customers being home-centric, off-premise, but I'm getting the sense that customers are going to work, back to work. What have you found in your survey?
So in our latest survey, we found that work from home trends have really stabilized over the past few months. And today we find ourselves in a sort of a 2/3, 1/3 workforce, where 2/3 has still connection to a place of work or an office. I believe 44% of our respondents in our latest survey primarily work from the office. And then, if you add people that currently work in a bit of a hybrid environment, or people that recently rejoined the office, right, we end up with two-thirds of workers recreating this connection to a workplace, which allows casual eateries, coffee shops, breakfast places to maybe pick up a little bit of traffic that they lost through the pandemic. But we also have, to your point of being very home centric, we have about 1/3 of workers today primarily working from home. I'm recording from my own office.
I was going to comment on that.
So I think that there is home centricity, and I think there's still demand for food and beverages even when we're at home, right? I think some of those breakfast and coffee places saw their shoulder hours gaining traffic a little bit, because maybe people don't get a coffee at 8 a.m. in the morning, then they go at 10:30 for a little break. So yes, people are going back to work, but people are also home centric, and that's just going to be the new way forward for restaurants, especially those that are pretty dependent on those office workers or commuters for traffic and sales.
So just to add to that, I know Francois was referencing the survey data that we're seeing, but I can back that up with what we're seeing with real data from the brands that we work with. that it's really, as people return to work, we are seeing an uptick in those traditional hours, whether that be the lunchtime drive rush or, those morning day parts for those breakfast brands. But it's also seeing those non-traditional hours. So seeing that we are still seeing pretty significant traffic growth in those, later morning hours, whether it be the 9-10 o'clock hour in, breakfast / bagel brands, or even in other QSR, seeing, non-traditional lunch hours. So additional lift during that, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock hour, which we traditionally didn't see.
Interesting. So I may be sitting at home versus at an office, but I'd still love that bagel that I used to stop at 7:30 in the morning to get. Now I run over from my house at 9:30.
Right, because as we've seen, a lot of employers are being more flexible with those work hours, whether it's that hybrid schedule of being in the office, 2 days a week, 3 days a week. But there's also that increased flexibility as people have worked from home. Many are starting earlier, working later, so kind of shifting their dining hours accordingly based off their new normal of work life.
Well, we've covered a lot already. As we move into 2022 and operators are finishing up their plans, Francois, what would you say your top advice would be for operators?
Top advice. That's always a tough one. I think if there's light at the end of the tunnel, we've seen that throughout the pandemic, habits have been pretty sticky. As we ask participants, are you ordering more takeout? Are you ordering more? Are you going in to dine into restaurants more and things like that, right? All those habits have been pretty sticky for quite a few months now. We did see, intention to dine out, intention to order takeout, intention to, future use of restaurant decreased a little bit in our latest survey, which could be a negative sign. But at the same time, we've seen quite a bit of volatility in intentions. And I think that's really more related to how much we talk negatively in the press about COVID and then how much we talk about it positively, right? And people kind of change their intentions, like, oh, there's a lot of cases, so I'm not going to go out. Oh, there's less cases today, so maybe I'll go out, right? But in the end, habits have been pretty sticky, and hopefully, that continues into 2022 for operators, because it's been challenging almost a couple of years now, and a little bit of continuity and stability would be, I'm sure, welcome.
So you're overall optimistic.
Overall optimistic, yeah. I think you have to be, right?
Yeah, we've gotten through a lot.
Yep.
Matt, what would you say your top advice for operators would be?
I would just say that I think we know that going into 2022, we're still expecting a lot of instability in the restaurant space. Brands are going to continue to battle the current crisis of trying to find employees and how they can manage that. We've already kind of talked about, the value equation and managing what you can manage, but making sure that we, looking at all aspects of those customer touch points. So knowing that as we shift from, in restaurant dining to off premise, obviously people are taking part with our brand through apps and through our website. But as Francois touched on earlier, a lot are using the app or website to kind of navigate the menu, but they're still preferring to call in. So doing little things like making sure that the person answering that phone is providing those same opportunities to, upsell the guest into additional items or higher priced features they might not be aware of, that we know that they would be experiencing if they were in restaurant, or doing that virtually through an app or website. Also making sure that we're just maximizing the potential of our menu, what we're offering, whether it be to go or through delivery, just making sure that we're offering the right items and how we structure those prices, which is all something that obviously RMS can help with.
I think you said something interesting, Matt, with the use of technology. And what we found in our survey is that people would rather use the proprietary apps of restaurants than third parties. So, maybe that's another bright note for 2022, right? That all those, technology dollars that brands spend in building those those apps, those online ordering platforms and things like that. Like consumers do prefer using those over third-party applications, such as, the Uber Eats and DoorDash of the world. So maybe that's also a bright spot for operators, and maybe a place where brand can really leverage their presence to favor themselves amongst the consumers.
Yeah, I was going to say that it's interesting because there seems to be, what I'm hearing from both of you is there's just a significant shift in service models, regardless, right? The fine dining person can't necessarily rely on their sommelier to increase average check. They have to rely on whoever they chose to answer the phone, right, for that takeout order or their website. But to your point, Francois, it sounds like the investments that were made, fast and amazingly fast in early 2020 those behaviors are here to stay. So that investment was a good one, right?
It sure seems like it. I think I had my first experience at a Shake Shack in Tampa recently with my wife, because before that, Tampa wasn't on the Shake Shack map, right? We would have to be in Boston and New York to get it, right? And our first reflex was, okay, let's download the app and order pickup,
Yeah, I was going to say 3-4 years ago, you would have got in line, right?
Yeah, just like everybody else, right?
It's amazing. Well, it's been so valuable to discuss these trends and get a sense of where the consumer's going in 2022. Well, thank you, gentlemen. To learn more about the latest consumer insights, sales, and traffic trends, or to get in touch with any of RMS's experts, visit revenuemanage.com. And to get the latest from Revenue Stream, be sure to subscribe to our channel, like this video, and don't forget to hit the bell.